Back for day 7. I'm becoming more well read. Do this a little bit earlier than I did last night, man. Still on the same book. Still got a little while to go, man. As you can see, this is as much as we gotta go. Probably like 300, 400 pages. But yeah, man. If you've just been trying to, just trying to read more, or you just become more articulate, or whatever, just pull up a chair with me and just let's get hop right into it. I know last night finished off like chapter 17, page 182. Um, and we left off where, dang, where did we leave off? Scully was doing, they was celebrating Scully. Oh, Icarus. That's chapter 17. Talks about what goes up must come down. But something about how the friendship with Scully was still good and things like that. They actually throwing him a party and stuff like that. Um, but so it says, in response, Scully effused about the joys of being Jobs' partner for the past year, and he concluded with a line that, for different reasons, everyone at the table found memorable. Apple has one leader, he said, Steve and me. He looked across the room, caught Jobs' eye, and watched him smile, as it was as if we were communicating with each other. Scully recalled, but he also noticed that Arthur Rock and some of the others were looking quizzical, perhaps even skeptical. They were worried that Jobs was completely rolling him. They had hired Scully to control Jobs, and now it was clear that Jobs was the one in control. Scully was so eager for Steve's approval that he was unable to stand up to him. Rock recalled, keeping Jobs happy and deferring to his expertise may have seemed like a smart strategy to Scully, but he failed to realize that it was not in Jobs' nature to share control. Deference, deference, deference. Yeah, I need to look that one up. Deference. I need to work on that one. But deference, deference. Let's go with that one. Deference did not come naturally to him. He began to become more vocal about how he thought the company should be run. At the 1984 business strategy meeting, for example, he pushed to make the company's centralized sales and marketing staffs bid on the right to provide their services to the various product divisions. This would have meant, for example, that the Macintosh Group could decide not to use Apple's marketing team and instead create one of his own. No one else was in favor, but Jobs kept trying to ram it through. People were looking to me to take control and to get him to sit down and shut up, but I didn't, Scully recalled. As the meeting broke up, he heard someone whisper, "Why doesn't Scully shut him up?" That's where we were. He's the one that they hired to, wrangle in Steve and everything like that, but Steve done charmed him and got him going. And now he's still doing the same stuff, just stepping up in meetings, having people bid, having people think about, and that's where we left off. He was at the he had too much creative control, and he had made it everything like the Charlie Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka. That's where he came. That's exactly what happened. You can't paint a factory pure white. There's going to be dust and stuff all over. Mook replied, "There's no white that's too white for Steve." She ended up going along. With its pure white walls and its bright blue, yellow, and red machines, the factory floor looked like an Alexander Calder showcase, said Coleman. Boom. That's where we at. When asked about his obsessive concern over the look of the factory, Jobs said it was a way to ensure a passion for perfection. I'd go out to the factory and I'd put on white gloves to check for dust. I'd find it everywhere, on machines, on the top of the racks, on the floor, and I'd ask Debbie to get it clean. I told her I thought we should be able to eat off the floor of the factory. Well, this drove Debbie up the wall. She didn't understand why, and I couldn't articulate it back then. She See, I'd been very influenced by what I'd seen in Japan. Part of what I greatly admired there, and part of what we were lacking in our factory, was a sense of teamwork and discipline. If we didn't have the discipline to keep that place spotless, then we weren't going to have the discipline to keep all these machines running. That's very interesting though, like just the connection between like Japan and like A lot of things that we use nowadays that we don't really think of as Japanese. So you got the Hondas, you got the Toyotas, but even like the influence on Apple, and even they gave Phil Knight over at Nike. They gave him his little shoot. They was the first people to manufacture for him. You really get him going, and even like doing his designs and stuff like that, and innovative nature. Then you got the PS5s and Sony and Ja- Japan is and then they got the anime. You got the Naruto's and Japan is a very. I need to do more studying on like just Japan itself. Very interesting. One Sunday morning, Jobs brought his father to see the factory. Paul Jobs had always been fastidious, fastidious about making sure that his craftsmanship was exacting and his tools in order. And his son was proud to show that he could do the same. Coleman came along to give the tour. Steve was like beaming. She recalled. He was so proud to show his father this creation. Jobs explained how everything worked, and his father seemed truly admiring. He kept looking at his father, who touched everything and looked how and loved how clean and perfect everything looked. Things were not quite as sweet when Danielle Mitterrand toured the factory. The Cuba admiring wife of France's socialist president Francois Mitterrand asked a lot of questions through her translator about the working conditions, while Jobs, who had grabbed Alan Rosman to serve as his translator, kept trying to explain the advanced robotics and technology. After Jobs talked about the just in time production schedule, she asked about overtime pay. He was annoyed. He was annoyed, so he described how automation helped him keep down labor costs, a subject he knew would not delight her. Is it hard work? She asked. How much vacation time do they get? Jobs couldn't contain himself. If she's so interested in their welfare, he said to her translator, tell her she can come work with. She can tell her she can come work here anytime. The translator turned pale and said nothing. After a moment, Rosman stepped in to say in French, job, jobs. Oh, after a moment, Rosman stepped in to say in French, mm, Jobs says he thanks you for your visit and your interest in the factory. Neither Jobs nor Madame Mitterrand knew what happened. Rosman recalled, but her translator looked very relieved. Afterward, as he sped his Mercedes down the freeway toward Cupertino, Jobs fumed to Rosman about Madame's Mitterrand's attitude. At one point, he was going just over 100 miles per hour when a policeman stopped him and began writing a ticket. After a few minutes, as the officer scribbled away, Jobs honked. Excuse me? The policeman said. Jobs replied, I'm in a hurry. Amazingly, the officer didn't get mad. He simply finished writing the ticket and warned that if Jobs was caught going over 55 again, he would be sent to jail. As soon as the policeman left, Jobs got back on the road and accelerated to 100. He absolutely believed that the normal rules didn't apply to him, Rosman marveled. That's kind of, yeah. He didn't want to talk about the conditions, though. He just want to talk about the technology and things of that nature. It's very interesting, though. Like, you can make a product that's situated in and all like inclusive for like the human person, and then when it comes to like wanting to talk about the human person and the human nature of how the product is made, you don't want to talk about that. It's just interesting. His wife Joanna Hoffman saw the same thing when she accompanied Jobs to Europe a few months after the Macintosh was launched. He was just completely obnoxious and thinking he could get away with anything, she recalled. In Paris, she had arranged a formal dinner with French software developers, but Jobs suddenly decided he didn't want to go. Instead, he shut the car door on Hoffman and told her he was going to see the poster artist Fallon instead. The developers were so pissed off that they wouldn't shake her hands, she said. In Italy, she took an in Italy, he took an instant dislike to Apple's general manager, a soft, rotund guy who had come from a conventional business. Jobs told him bluntly that he was not impressed with his team or his sales strategy. You don't deserve to be able to sell the Mac, Jobs said coldly. But that was mild compared to his reaction to the restaurant the hapless manager had chosen. Jobs demanded a vegan meal, but the waiter very elaborately proceeded to dish out a sauce filled with sour cream. So sour cream not vegan. Hmm. Okay. Jobs got Jobs got so nasty that Hoffman had to threaten him. She whispered that if he hadn't that he did. Hmm. She whispered that if he didn't calm down, she was going to pour her hot coffee on his lap. The most substan- the most substantive the most substantive disagreements Jobs had on the European trip concerned sales forecasts. Using his reality distortion field, Jobs was always pushing his team to come up with higher projections. He kept threatening the European managers that he wouldn't give them any allocations unless they projected bigger forecasts. They insisted on being realistic, and Hoffman had to referee. By the end of the trip, my whole body was shaking uncontrollably, Hoffman recalled. It was on this trip that Jobs first got to know Jean, Jean, Jean-Louis Gassi, Apple's manager in France. Gassi was among the few to stand up successfully to Jobs on the trip. He has his own way with the truth, Gassi later remarked. The only way to deal with him was to outbully him. When Jobs made his usual threat about cutting down on France's allocations if Gassi didn't jack up sales projections, Gassi got angry. I remember grabbing his lapel and telling him to stop, and then he backed down. I used to be an angry man myself. I am a recovering assaholic, so I could recognize that in Steve. Gassi was impressed. However, at how is he like an assaholic, right? But he goes on these tours for enlightenment and meditate and all this stuff. The duality of a man, right? Gassi had to grab him by his lapel. Gassi was impressed, however, at how Jobs could turn on the charm when he wanted to. Francois Mitterrand, who had been preaching the gospel of informatique pour toi, computing for all, and various academic experts in technology such as Marvin Minsky and Nicholas Negroponte came over to sing in the choir. Jobs gave a talk to the group at the Hotel Bristol and painted a picture of how France could move ahead if it put computers in all of its schools. Paris also brought out the romantic in him. Both Gasset and Negroponte tell tales of him pining over women while there. All right. Golly. Chapter 17 alone, ain't it? Yeah. To be honest, I'm not getting through chapter. What in the world? Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not getting through chapter 17 today. Okay. And this chapter don't end until page 210. I'm on 186. We're gonna figure out. We're gonna get through this last. I don't even know what that's called, but like this next segment titled "Falling." Falling. I'm gonna get through that next segment and then sayonara. Falling. After the burst of excitement that accompanied the release of Macintosh, its sales began to taper off in the second half of 1984. The problem was a fundamental one. It was a dazzling but woefully slow and underpowered computer, and no amount of hoopla could mask that. Its beauty was that its user interface looked like a sunny playroom rather than a somber dark screen with a sickly green pulsating mm, than a somber dark screen with a sickly green pulsating letters and surly command letters. But that led to its greatest weakness. A character on a text based display took less than a byte of code, whereas when the Mac drew a letter pixel by pixel in any elegant font you wanted, it required 20 or 30 times more memory. The Lisa handled this. The Lisa handled this by shipping with more than one 1000K RAM, whereas the Macintosh made do with 128K. Mm. Another problem was the lack of an internal hard disk drive. Jobs had called Joanna Hoffman a Xerox bigot when she fought for such a storage device. He insisted that the Macintosh had just have just one floppy disk drive. If you wanted to copy data, you could end up with a new form of tennis elbow from having to swap floppy disk in and out the single drive. In addition, the Macintosh lacked a fan, another example of Jobs' dogmatic stubbornness. Fans he felt distracted from the calm of a computer. This caused many component failures and earned the Macintosh the nickname the beige toaster, which did not enhance its popularity. It was so seductive that it had sold well enough for the first few months. It was so seductive that it had sold well enough for the first few months. But when people became more aware of its limitations, sales fell. As Hoffman later lamented, the reality distortion field can serve as a spur, but then reality itself hits. At the end of 1984, with Lisa sales virtually non existent and Macintosh sales falling below 10,000 a month, Jobs made a shoddy and atypical decision out of desperation. He decided to take the inventory of unsold leases, graft on a Macintosh emulation program, and sell them as a new product, the Macintosh XL. Since the Lisa had been discontinued and would not be restarted, it was an unusual instance of Jobs producing something that he did not believe in. I was furious because the Mac XL wasn't real, said Hoffman. It was just to blow the excess leases out the door. It sold well and then we had to discontinue the horrible hoax. So I resigned. Icarus. What comes up must come down. Come on, Steve. Not to say now I'm praying for that, but it's like it's all cycles, all seasons, ain't it? You always gonna get a winter to come back around after you get through March and June and July. You bank on that. The dark mood was evident in the ad that was developed in January 1985, which was supposed to reprise the anti-IBM sentiment of the resonant 1984 ad. Unfortunately, there was a fundamental difference. The first ad had ended with on an heroic, optimistic note, but the storyboards presented by Lee Clow and Jay Chiat for the new ad titled "Lemmings" showed dark-suited, blindfolded corporate managers marching off a cliff to their death. From the beginning, both Jobs and Scully were uneasy. It didn't seem as if it would convey a positive or glorious image of Apple, but instead would merely insult every manager who had bought an IBM. Jobs and Scully asked for other ideas, but the agency folks pushed back. You guys didn't want to run the 1984 last year, one of them said. According to Scully, Lee Clow added, I will put I will put my whole reputation, everything on this commercial. When the film version done by Ridley Scott's brother Tony came in, the concept looked even worse. The mindless managers marching off the cliff were singing a funeral-paced version of the Snow White song, "Hee ho, hee ho," and the jury filmmaking made it even more depressing than the storyboards portended. I can't believe you're going to insult business people across America by running that, Debbie Coleman yelled at Jobs when she saw the ad. At the marketing meeting, she stood up to make her point about how much he hated it. I literally put a resignation letter on his desk. I wrote it on my Mac. I thought it was an I thought it was an affront to corporate managers. We were just beginning to get a toehold with a desk. We were just beginning to get a toehold with desktop public. We were just beginning to get a toehold with desk. We're gonna get this. We were just beginning to get a toehold with desktop pub. We were just beginning to get a toehold with desktop publishing. Nevertheless, Jobs and Scully bent to the agency's entreaties and ran the commercial during the Super Bowl. During the Super Bowl, yeah, this is bad. They went to the game together at Stanford Stadium with Scully's wife, Lizzie, who couldn't stand Jobs, and Jobs' new girlfriend, Tina Retzi. When the commercial was shown near the end of the fourth quarter of a jury game, the fans watched on the overhead screen and had little reaction. Across the country, most of the response was negative. It insulted the very people Apple was trying to reach. The president of a market research firm told Fortune. Apple's marketing manager suggested afterward that the company might want to buy an ad in the Wall Street Journal apologizing. Apologizing. Jay Chiat threatened that if Apple did that, his agency would buy. Threatened that if Apple did that, his agency would buy the facing ad and apologize for the apology. That's crazy. Dang. But y'all knew exactly. Y'all said like maybe we shouldn't do the ad. Like it's gonna da 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 da. It's gonna get this reaction, and then you got that reaction. I mean, y'all was right. I guess that's a good thing. Jobs' discomfort with both the ad and the situation at Apple in general was on display when he traveled to New York in January to do another round of one-on-one press interviews. Andy Cunningham from Regis McKenna's firm was in charge of hand-holding and logistics at the Carlisle. When Jobs arrived, he told her that his suite needed to be completely redone, even though it was 10 p.m. and the meetings were to begin the next day. The piano was not in the piano was not in the right place. The strawberries were the wrong type, but his biggest objection was that he didn't like the flowers. He wanted calla lilies. We got into a big fight on what a calla lily is, Cunningham recalled. I know what they are because I had them at my wedding, but he insisted on having a different type of lily and said that I was stupid because I didn't know what a real calla lily was. So Cunningham went out and this being New York was able to find a place open at midnight where she could get the lilies he wanted. By the time they got the room rearranged, Jobs started objecting to what she was wearing. That suit's disgusting, he told her. Cunningham knew that at times he was just Cunningham knew that at times he just simmered with undirected anger, so she tried to calm him down. Look, I know you're angry and I know how you feel, she said. You have no fucking idea how I feel, he shot back. No fucking idea what it's like to be me. Hey, bro, he is a kid. He's a toddler. He's a he's a toddler. Very interesting. Because toddlers have great imaginations and they can build a lot of things and use a lot of things and just see a lot of things as different stuff. They can see mud as a bomb. They can see mud as a spell. They can see mud as magic. A lot of things that mud could be, but you also be stupid for the mud not being magic in your head because it's not a real calla lily. Um, but yeah, appreciate you tuning in. If you did tune in, we finished on page 188. Um, sorry, chapter 17 is whipping me right now. I didn't get through it. But again, if you're trying to read more, just pull up a chair and tap in with me, man. I am. We'll get through it. We'll get through it. We made a little bit more progress through, but stay tuned. Today was day 7.